From the very first moment, Ethan saw her leaning against the wide glass window of his apartment, her shoulders trembling as though she were holding the entire weight of her world inside her small, tired body. He knew this night would change something. Not because she looked broken, not because she looked like she was on the edge of tears, but because, for the first time in years, he felt an instinct he thought he had lost. The instinct to hold someone before they shattered. It was supposed to be just a casual visit, a simple check-in after hearing her voice crack on the phone earlier that day. But now, watching Clara step slowly toward the bed, as if gravity were heavier for her than for anyone else, he felt a pull that anchored him where he stood. And when she whispered, with the last flicker of strength in her voice, that if she fell asleep here, he shouldn't let her go. He knew instantly, deeply, without hesitation, that he wouldn't. Not tonight, not ever again. If you believe kindness, loyalty, and second chances still matter in this world, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps stories like this reach more hearts. Ethan didn't ask Clara to explain herself. He didn't ask why her usually bright hazel eyes looked clouded and distant. He didn't need an explanation. Her exhaustion spoke louder than any confession. She stood there, wearing a soft champagne-colored satin slip, the fabric slightly wrinkled from her long day and the stress she tried to hide. The evening light poured into the room, pale and quiet, brushing her hair like a whisper. She looked like someone trying to stay awake just long enough to feel safe. And he, standing behind her in his casual dark sweatshirt and gray lounge pants, felt his chest tighten when her breathing hitched. He stepped forward slowly, placing his hands gently on her waist, careful, steady, as though afraid she might break if he moved too fast. She didn't pull away. Instead, she exhaled a shudder that said more than her words ever could. Clara had always been the strong one, or at least she pretended to be, the kind of woman who smiled politely at things that hurt, who apologized for things that weren't her fault, who tried to carry more than she was ever meant to. She was 30, successful in her job at a California marketing firm, dependable, always there for others. But lately, her life had been a quiet battlefield. Her breakup 6 months earlier had left her doubting everything about herself. Her younger brother's illness had drained her emotionally, and her work had begun demanding more than she could give. The world around her had grown loud, harsh, unforgiving, and she had grown silent. Ethan had noticed it long before she admitted it. He had known Clara for years, first as a friend, then something more complicated, a closeness neither of them dared to define. He had always carried a steady calmness, a kind of protective warmth that made people trust him. But with Clara, it was different. Her pain pulled at him, her presence steadied him, and tonight, as he held her, something inside him told him that she wasn't asking for comfort. She was asking for a moment where she didn't have to hold her fears alone. The room felt suspended in time. The soft sheets, the dimming sunlight, the muted hum of the city outside, it all folded around them quietly. Clara leaned her head slightly back against his shoulder, her breath slowing, her body relaxing inch by inch as though she had been waiting for this warmth longer than she realized. Ethan pressed his cheek gently against her hair, not saying anything, just breathing with her. Her fingers lightly touched his forearms as though needing assurance that he was really there. As she stood wrapped in his arms, memories drifted through her mind like old photographs. She remembered the night she cried alone in her car because she didn't want anyone in her family to worry. She remembered the mornings she forced herself out of bed, telling herself she had no choice but to keep going. She remembered the promises she made to people who never showed up for her. And she remembered Ethan, always soft-spoken, always patient, always stepping in quietly when the rest of the world turned away. But she had never allowed herself to lean on him fully. Until now. Ethan's heart had its own memories. He remembered watching Clara from across countless rooms, noticing the way she tried to laugh through her exhaustion. He remembered the night she told him her ex had walked out on her during one of the hardest months of her life. He remembered wanting to hold her then, but stopping himself because she didn't ask. Now she had asked, even if only in a whisper. And it was enough. He guided her gently to sit on the edge of the bed, his hands still steady around her waist as though afraid she might fade away if he let go too soon. She closed her eyes and leaned into him, her breathing finally deepening, evening out. Ethan's presence felt like the quietest promise she had ever received. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just a soft, unwavering vow that he wasn't going anywhere. Clara didn't fall asleep immediately. Instead, she let her thoughts unravel, drifting between guilt, relief, and fragile hope. She wondered when she had last allowed herself to be vulnerable. She wondered how long she had been pretending that she didn't need anyone. and she wondered what would happen if she allowed herself to trust him, not just for tonight but for the days that followed. Ethan didn't rush anything. He didn't ask her to talk. He simply held her, his breath steady against the back of her neck, his hands warm against her skin, and slowly, gently, as though her mind had finally given permission to her body, Clara's tension began to melt. Tears slipped from her eyes silently, and Ethan felt her shoulders tremble. He tightened his arms around her, not to contain her, but to let her know he felt every unspoken ache. Clara wasn't used to being protected. She wasn't used to being held when she cried. But now, in this quiet apartment, with its soft light and soft sheets and softer heartbeats, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Rest. Safety. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't supposed to endure everything alone. Her tears slowed and exhaustion washed over her like a gentle tide. She whispered again, almost subconsciously, that she didn't want him to let go if she fell asleep, and he whispered right back, quietly, with a certainty that wrapped around her like another layer of warmth, that he wouldn't. His voice wasn't dramatic, it wasn't poetic, it simply carried truth. Minutes slipped into hours. Clara drifted between sleep and awareness, occasionally tightening her fingers around his arm as though checking that he was still there. And Ethan stayed, still, patient, steady. Every time her breathing faltered, he soothed her with a small movement of his thumb. Every time she shivered, he drew her closer. He watched over her as the daylight faded into the mellow silver of night. For the first time in months, Clara slept without fear, and for the first time in years, Ethan realized that the thing he had been searching for, the connection he thought he had lost, was right here, asleep in his arms. But this story wasn't just about a night of comfort. It was about what happened after. Clara woke up just before sunrise. Her head rested against Ethan's chest, her fingers loosely holding his shirt. For a moment she didn't move, she simply listened to his heartbeat. Slow, calm, certain. When she finally opened her eyes, she didn't feel embarrassed or afraid. She felt full, as though the empty spaces inside her had been gently stitched back together. Ethan's eyes were already open, watching her with a tenderness that made her throat tighten. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She saw everything in his expression, the patience, the concern, the affection he had been holding in for far too long. Clara sat up slowly, brushing her hair back. She felt lighter, like breathing came easier. She thought about everything she had been through and how close she had come to drowning alone. And then she thought about last night, how he had held her without asking for anything, how he had steadied her without judgment. It shook her in a way she wasn't prepared for, because she realized that love didn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrived quietly, in the form of someone who stayed. Ethan reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she threaded her fingers between his, letting the silence speak for both of them. She realized that last night, she hadn't asked him to stay because she was weak. She had asked because she trusted him in a way she didn't trust anyone else. And he had stayed because she meant more to him than she knew. In the weeks that followed, Clara began rebuilding her life, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Ethan became her quiet constant, not rescuing her, but standing beside her. He helped her breathe through panic attacks, listened to her fears about her brother, and walked with her through long evenings when she didn't want to be alone. And she, in turn, learned how to let someone see the parts of her she had always hidden. She found a strength she didn't know she had, not because Ethan carried her pain, but because he reminded her she didn't have to face everything in darkness. Their bond deepened, slowly but surely. Not rushed, not forced. It grew from truth, trust, and the softest form of love, the kind that heals without demanding anything in return. Clara later said that the night she asked him not to let her go was the night she finally learned the difference between someone who stayed out of obligation and someone who stayed out of love. Ethan said it was the night he realized that some people are meant to be held, not because they're fragile, but because they deserve gentleness. And as they stood once again by the window months later, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, not because she was tired or hurting, but because she finally felt safe enough to rest in someone's presence. Ethan wrapped his arm around her waist, the same way he had that night, but now with the quiet knowledge that she wasn't going anywhere either. Their story wasn't about dramatic confessions or grand gestures. It was about small moments, steady hands, whispered reassurances, shared silence, and the understanding that sometimes love begins with simply not letting go when someone needs you most. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more emotional stories to you. Special request, before you leave, drop a comment telling us which moment of the story moved you the most.